Emily Johnson, though the world knew her only by that name and not by the truth hidden beneath it, Emily Harrington, sole daughter and heir to the Harrington Empire, woke slowly as pale morning light spilled into the bedroom. The sunlight slipped through thin, gauzy curtains, painting faint gold lines across the worn hardwood floor of their Brooklyn apartment. It was the kind of place that would never appear in glossy real estate magazines. Small, slightly cramped, the radiator knocking in protest every winter. But to Emily, it felt warm, safe, and real. This life was hers by choice. The apartment smelled faintly of last night's takeout pizza, pepperoni and garlic knots, mixed with the deeper, comforting scent of fresh coffee drifting in from the kitchen. That smell alone usually made her smile. It meant Mark was awake. It meant normalcy. It meant home. She shifted beneath the faded blue comforter, moving carefully. At 7 months pregnant, nothing about movement was easy anymore. Her body felt heavier, slower, but also powerful in a way she had never known before. Her belly rose gently, round and unmistakable beneath the blanket, a visible promise of the future she believed in with her whole heart. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. There it was, a flutter, then another. A soft kick. Emily exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her lips curving into a tender smile. "Good morning, little one," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the city outside the window. The baby answered with a firmer kick this time, as if responding, as if listening. Emily laughed quietly, tears stinging the corners of her eyes for no reason other than love. She stayed like that for a long moment, palm pressed to her belly, grounding herself in the miracle happening inside her. Every ache in her back, every swollen ankle, every sleepless night suddenly felt worth it. This was her family. This was the life she chose. She slowly pushed herself upright, wincing slightly as her lower back protested. Pregnancy had changed her in ways no book could explain. She felt softer, more emotional, but also stronger, fiercer. She would do anything to protect this child. From the kitchen came a sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Mark's humming. It was off-key, as always. Some old rock song, maybe the Rolling Stones, maybe Led Zeppelin. Emily could never tell them apart, but she loved that about him. He sang the same way he lived, confident, loud, unapologetic. She smiled as she listened. Mark Davis, her husband, 3 years married, 5 years together, the man she believed in. He was ambitious, sometimes painfully so. A mid-level manager at a fast-growing tech firm in Manhattan, Mark lived for progress, promotions, and proving himself. He worked late nights, attended endless networking events, talked constantly about the next step. Some people might have found it exhausting. Emily found it inspiring. She loved the fire in his eyes when he spoke about success. She loved that he wanted to build something with his own hands. She loved that he wanted to provide for their family without ever knowing that her own family's billions could erase every financial worry in a heartbeat. And that was exactly why she had never told him. Emily had learned early in life that money changed people. Growing up as Emily Harrington meant growing up surrounded by luxury, but also suspicion. She had watched people smile too brightly, linger too long, ask questions that felt rehearsed. She had seen friendships disappear the moment the perks disappeared. Romance, especially, had always come with conditions. Her father, Alexander Harrington, had built an empire from nothing. One software startup in Silicon Valley had turned into a global conglomerate spanning technology, real estate, and finance. He was a legend, feared, admired, endlessly discussed. But to Emily, he was simply Dad. The man who had taught her how to ride a bike on the winding paths of their Hamptons estate. The man who had knelt beside her bed and read stories about underdogs and dreamers. The man who had told her again and again, "Your worth has nothing to do with money." After his death, the world wanted a Harrington. Emily wanted to be human. Then there were her brothers. Ethan, the eldest, now CEO, sharp, controlled, protective to the point of suffocation. Lucas, the charming deal-maker, smiling even when calculating 3 moves ahead. Nathan, the youngest tech genius who saw patterns where others saw chaos. They had all warned her. "Em," Ethan had said more than once, his voice low and serious, "you deserve someone who sees you, not the Harrington name." And that was exactly why she had become Emily Johnson, a freelance graphic designer, a woman scraping by on small contracts, a nobody. No private jets, no trust funds, no safety net. Just talent, hope, and love. That was how she had met Mark. Central Park, a charity event for urban green spaces. She had been volunteering, handing out flyers in a simple sundress, hair pulled back, no makeup, no jewelry worth noticing. Mark had approached her holding 2 cups of lemonade. "You look like you could use a break from saving the world," he had said with a shy grin. She laughed, and something had shifted. They had talked for hours about art, about the chaos of New York, about dreams that felt just out of reach. Mark had spoken about growing up working class, about watching his parents struggle, about his hunger to build something better for himself. Emily had listened and fallen. For the first time, someone wasn't impressed by her last name because he didn't know it. Their love had grown in stolen moments. Cheap wine on the Great Lawn, late-night walks across the Brooklyn Bridge, long talks on their tiny balcony about children, values, and love. When Mark proposed on a rainy evening in their living room with a modest ring, Emily cried harder than she ever had. This is it, she thought. This is forever. Their wedding was simple. City Hall, burgers afterward, no headlines, no cameras, just love. But now, as Thanksgiving week arrived, something felt fragile. They were heading upstate to Mark's family home. Emily had always dreaded these trips, though she never said it out loud. Diane, Karen, Mark's mother and sister had never hidden their disdain. An artist? How quaint! A hobby, not a career. Not good enough. Emily swallowed the insults, smiled through the comments, endured it all because she loved Mark. "They're just protective," he always said. "They'll come around." As they packed the car, Emily felt another strong kick. "Our little girl is excited," she laughed softly. Mark smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He'd been distant lately. Late nights, silenced phone buzzes, vague explanations. Sarah from marketing. Emily told herself not to overthink it. Trust meant everything. The drive north was tense. Snow flurried outside, silence thick inside the SUV. Mark gripped the wheel too tightly. "Everything okay?" Emily asked. "Just work." But doubt whispered. At the Davis family home, judgment greeted her immediately. Comments about her body, her career, her worth. Then came the name again. Sarah. That night, alone in the guest room, her phone buzzed. "Check his emails. You deserve to know." Her hands shook as she opened the laptop, and her world shattered. Photos, emails, words that called her dead weight. The betrayal hit harder than any physical blow. When she confronted him, Mark didn't deny it. He justified it. He chose ambition. The next morning, he suggested a drive. She agreed, still hoping, still believing. Until the car stopped. Get out. The shove. The trunk. The darkness. The cold. The sound of the engine fading away. Emily screamed, cried, prayed. As contractions ripped through her body, she held her belly and whispered the only promise she had left. "Hold on, Olivia. Mommy's here." And in that freezing darkness, the illusion of forever died. Darkness swallowed Emily whole. Not the soft darkness of sleep or the comforting dark of a quiet room, but a thick, crushing blackness that pressed in from every direction. The trunk was barely large enough for her body, let alone her pregnant form. Cold metal dug into her shoulders and hips as she shifted, panic rising like bile in her throat. Air. She needed air. Her breaths came shallow and fast, fogging in front of her face before vanishing into nothing. The smell was sharp and metallic, oil, rust, old fabric, mixed with something damp. Snow muffled the outside world, sealing her in like a coffin. "Mark!" she screamed, slamming her palms against the lid. The sound echoed uselessly, swallowed by layers of steel and distance. "Help! Please, someone help me!" Nothing answered, only the wind howling across the empty Adirondack highway. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Each beat echoed in her ears, loud and frantic. She clawed at the lining of the trunk, fingers scraping against fabric, nails bending back painfully. That was when she felt it. A violent kick, then another. Her baby. "Oh, God, no!" Emily whispered, terror flooding her veins. Her hand flew to her belly, even though she could barely move. The kicks weren't playful anymore. They were frantic, desperate. The baby felt it too. "It's okay," Emily lied softly, voice trembling. "Mommy's here. Mommy's right here." Another sharp pain ripped through her abdomen. Not a kick, a contraction. Her breath hitched. "No, not now," she sobbed. "Please, not now." Her body betrayed her, tightening painfully as another wave surged through her. She had read about preterm labor, stress, shock, cold. Every single trigger wrapped around her now like a curse. She was 7 months pregnant. It was too early. Her phone. A sudden, desperate realization struck her. Her phone was gone. She twisted as much as the cramped space allowed, padding around blindly, heart racing faster. Nothing. Mark had left it on the passenger seat. Of course he had. The darkness felt heavier after that. Time began to lose meaning. Minutes blurred into hours, or maybe it was the other way around. The cold crept deeper, seeping into her bones. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably, her limbs shaking as hypothermia slowly wrapped its icy fingers around her. She tried to focus. Breathe in, breathe out. But each breath burned her lungs. Her thoughts drifted, slipping between past and present. Her brother's voices echoed in her mind. "He's using you, Em. Love shouldn't hurt like this. If he ever hurts you, we're one call away." "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness. "I should have listened." Another contraction hit, stronger this time. She screamed, the sound raw, animalistic. "No! Please, please, God!" Her body curled inward as best it could, muscles locking, pain tearing through her like fire. Blood. She felt it before she saw it, warm and terrifying. Panic surged. "I can't do this," she cried. "I can't! Not alone!" But she was alone. Completely. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the contractions grew closer together. There was no clock, no way to count time, only pain. She thought of Olivia, the name she had whispered with hope. "Olivia, hold on, baby. Please hold on." Another wave hit. Her body pushed without her permission. She screamed until her throat burned, until her voice cracked and vanished. The pain was unbearable, primal, consuming. She felt herself slipping, consciousness flickering like a dying light bulb. And then, a sound. Small, fragile, a faint cry. For a moment, Emily thought she was hallucinating. Then she felt movement, a tiny, impossibly light weight against her body. Her baby. "Oh my God, Olivia!" she sobbed. With shaking hands, she pulled off her coat, wrapping the tiny form carefully, desperately. The baby was so small, too small, blue-tinged skin, weak, shallow breaths. "Stay with me," Emily pleaded, pressing her forehead against her daughter's. "Please, Mommy needs you to stay." Her vision blurred. Blood pooled beneath her. She felt cold, so cold. Her strength faded rapidly, each breath harder than the last. "Someone, please," she whispered, voice barely audible. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. Meanwhile, miles away, the city glowed. Mark stepped into Sarah's apartment, shrugging off his coat, a smug smile on his face. "It's done," he said casually. "Promotion's mine." Sarah laughed, kissing him. "My hero." They didn't hear Emily's screams. Back at the Davis house, Diane raised a glass. To new beginnings. They toasted, blind to the storm they had unleashed. Back on the highway, rescue helicopters sliced through the snow-filled sky. Nathan's tracker blinked on a screen. "She's here," Lucas whispered, panic in his voice. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Move. Now." The car was found buried under snow, silent and still. "Trunk!" a rescuer shouted. The lid was forced open. Cold air rushed in. Light. 2 survivors. Emily's body was limp, barely conscious. Her baby whimpered weakly. They were airlifted within minutes. In the hospital, doctors fought. Machines beeped. Tubes surrounded Olivia's tiny body. "She's a fighter," a nurse whispered. Emily woke hours later. White ceiling, beeping machines. Then faces. Her brothers. "Em, we're here." She broke. "He left us to die," she sobbed. Ethan's jaw tightened. Rage burned. "He'll pay." The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and quiet fear. It was a smell Emily would never forget, a sharp, sterile scent that clung to her lungs and settled into her memory, mixing forever with the sound of machines beeping in steady, unforgiving rhythms. Each beep was a reminder that life here was measured not in moments, but in breaths. Emily lay propped up against stiff white pillows, her body aching in places she hadn't known could hurt. Stitches pulled painfully each time she shifted. An IV line snaked from her arm, dripping fluids into her weakened body. Her throat was raw, her head heavy, her limbs trembling with exhaustion. But none of that mattered. Her eyes were locked on the incubator, on Olivia. So small. Too small. At just 2 pounds, her daughter looked more like a porcelain doll than a newborn baby. Her skin was translucent, delicate veins visible beneath the surface. Tiny tubes ran from her nose and mouth, helping her breathe. Wires were attached to her chest, tracking every fragile heartbeat. Emily reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed the incubator's glass. "Hi, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Mommy's here." She slid her hand through the small opening, careful not to disturb the wires, and gently wrapped her finger around Olivia's impossibly tiny hand. The baby's fingers twitched weakly. Emily sobbed. That tiny movement, so small, so fragile, felt like a miracle. "She's fighting," the nurse had said earlier. "She's strong." Emily clung to those words like a lifeline. Every time she closed her eyes, Mark's face flashed before her. Cold, detached, empty. The way his voice hadn't shaken, the way his eyes hadn't softened, the way he had walked away. This ends now. Her chest tightened painfully as tears streamed down her face. How could the man she loved leave her to die? How could he abandon his own child? A shadow moved beside her. Ethan. Her eldest brother stood rigidly near the window, his broad shoulders tense, fists clenched at his sides. He hadn't stopped pacing for more than a few seconds she'd woken up. The usually composed CEO, the man feared in boardrooms across the world, looked like a caged animal. Lucas sat on the edge of the bed, holding Emily's free hand in both of his. His charming smile was gone, replaced by quiet fury and grief. His eyes were red-rimmed, sleepless. Nathan sat slightly apart, laptop balanced on his knees, fingers flying across the keyboard at impossible speed. Screens reflected in his glasses, emails, maps, timelines, data scrolling endlessly. The Harrington brothers. Together. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "We should have dragged you home years ago." Emily turned her head slowly to look at him. Tears slipped down her temples into her hair. "I wanted real love," she whispered. The words felt small, weak, but they were honest. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked away, swallowing hard. Lucas leaned closer, brushing her hair back gently. "And that doesn't make this your fault," he said softly. Emily shook her head. "I ignored you, all of you. I thought if I lived like a normal person, loved like a normal person, I'd be safe." Nathan's fingers paused over the keyboard. "You were safe until he decided to be a monster." Silence fell heavy in the room. A nurse passed by the door, peeking in to check the monitors. Olivia's heart rate fluttered slightly, then steadied. Emily held her breath until it stabilized. Only then did she exhale. Lucas squeezed her hand. "Tell us everything," he said. "From the beginning." So she did. Her voice shook as she spoke, about Sarah, the emails, the words' dead weight, the drive, the trunk. Ethan's face darkened with every sentence. When Emily described the cold, the contractions, the fear, Lucas lowered his head, unable to hide his tears. Nathan stopped typing entirely. When she finished, the room felt heavier than before. "She was pregnant," Ethan said slowly, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. He left a pregnant woman on the side of the road, in the snow. Lucas looked up. He didn't just cheat, Em, he said gently. He planned this. Nathan turned his laptop toward them. I pulled Mark's emails and Sarah's. Emily's stomach dropped. There's more, Nathan continued. Sarah's a father. He's on the board. They've been coordinating Mark's promotion for months in exchange for loyalty. Ethan laughed darkly. So he sold his soul. And tried to bury our sister, Lucas added. Emily's hands shook. He said, custody, support, like it was a business deal. Ethan stepped closer to the bed, towering over it. His voice was deadly calm. He doesn't get custody. He doesn't get forgiveness. And he sure as hell doesn't get away with this. A sudden alarm pierced the room. Beep, beep, beep. Olivia's monitor. Emily gasped, panic flooding her veins. Please, what's wrong? What's happening? Nurses rushed in, voices urgent but controlled. Oxygen saturation's dropping. Emily tried to sit up, pain screaming through her body. Please, don't take her. Lucas gently pressed her back down. Em, let them help. Emily sobbed openly as doctors adjusted tubes, increased oxygen, murmuring medical terms she couldn't understand. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the monitor steadied. She stabilized, a doctor said, but she's critical. We're not out of the woods yet. Emily collapsed back against the pillows, shaking. Ethan placed a hand on the incubator, his massive fingers looking impossibly tiny next to Olivia's tiny body. She's a Harrington, he said quietly. She's strong. That night, as Thanksgiving came and went, the hospital room became their world. No turkey, no laughter. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and quiet fear. It was a smell Emily would never forget. A sharp, sterile scent that clung to her lungs and settled into her memory, mixing forever with the sound of machines beeping in steady, unforgiving rhythms. Each beep was a reminder that life here was measured not in moments, but in breaths. Emily lay propped up against stiff white pillows, her body aching in places she hadn't known could hurt. Stitches pulled painfully each time she shifted. An IV line snaked from her arm, dripping fluids into her weakened body. Her throat was raw, her head heavy, her limbs trembling with exhaustion. But none of that mattered. Her eyes were locked on the incubator. On Olivia. So small. Too small. At just 2 pounds, her daughter looked more like a porcelain doll than a newborn baby. Her skin was translucent, delicate veins visible beneath the surface. Tiny tubes ran from her nose and mouth, helping her breathe. Wires were attached to her chest, tracking every fragile heartbeat. Emily reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed the incubator's glass. "Hi, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Mommy's here." She slid her hand through the small opening, careful not to disturb the wires, and gently wrapped her finger around Olivia's impossibly tiny hand. The baby's fingers twitched weakly. Emily sobbed. That tiny movement, so small, so fragile, felt like a miracle. "She's fighting," the nurse had said earlier. "She's strong." Emily clung to those words like a lifeline. Every time she closed her eyes, Mark's face flashed before her. Cold, detached, empty. The way his voice hadn't shaken, the way his eyes hadn't softened, the way he had walked away. This ends now. Her chest tightened painfully as tears streamed down her face. How could the man she loved leave her to die? How could he abandon his own child? A shadow moved beside her. Ethan. Her eldest brother stood rigidly near the window, his broad shoulders tense, fists clenched at his sides. He hadn't stopped pacing for more than a few seconds she'd woken up. The usually composed CEO, the man feared in boardrooms across the world, looked like a caged animal. Lucas sat on the edge of the bed, holding Emily's free hand in both of his. His charming smile was gone, replaced by quiet fury and grief. His eyes were red-rimmed, sleepless. Nathan sat slightly apart, laptop balanced on his knees, fingers flying across the keyboard at impossible speed. Screens reflected in his glasses, emails, maps, timelines, data scrolling endlessly. The Harrington brothers. Together. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "We should have dragged you home years ago." Emily turned her head slowly to look at him. Tears slipped down her temples into her hair. "I wanted real love," she whispered. The words felt small, weak, but they were honest. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked away, swallowing hard. Lucas leaned closer, brushing her hair back gently. "And that doesn't make this your fault," he said softly. Emily shook her head. "I ignored you, all of you. I thought if I lived like a normal person, loved like a normal person, I'd be safe." Weeks later, the hospital doors finally opened for Emily. Not as a patient, but as a survivor. She moved slowly, her body still healing, her mind still fractured by memories she could not erase. A nurse wheeled her through the corridors one last time, past rooms filled with quiet hope and silent grief. Emily turned her head only once to look at the NICU. Olivia was still there, still fighting, still wrapped in wires and warmth and machines that breathed for her when she could not. "I'll be back tonight," Emily whispered through the glass. "Mommy promises." The nurse smiled gently. "She's stronger every day." Emily held onto those words as she was helped into the waiting car. The drive to the Harrington estate felt unreal. She had run from this life years ago. Now it was the only place that felt safe. The Hamptons mansion rose from behind iron gates like a fortress. White stone, endless glass, the Atlantic stretching endlessly beyond it. Staff lined up quietly as the car stopped. No applause, no questions, just respect. "Welcome home, Miss Harrington," the house manager said softly. Emily stepped inside. Marble floors echoed beneath her feet. Chandeliers glowed warmly. Ocean light flooded the halls. Luxury she once rejected. Protection she now needed. Her room overlooked the sea. Fresh flowers waited on the bedside table. A rocking chair had been placed near the window, ready for a baby who wasn't home yet. Emily's chest tightened. Every day followed the same painful rhythm. Mornings were therapy. Physical pain reminded her she was alive. Mental pain reminded her why she had to stay strong. The therapist's voice was calm, grounding her when memories clawed back. "You're safe now," she was told. But at night, safety disappeared. She woke screaming. The darkness of the trunk still lived inside her, the cold, the suffocation, Mark's voice echoing like a curse. Sometimes she reached for Olivia, forgetting for a split second that her daughter wasn't there. Then the emptiness crushed her. Every afternoon she pumped milk. Every evening she went to the hospital. Every night she prayed. And slowly, so slowly, it started to change. Olivia gained ounces. Her breathing stabilized. Her tiny fingers wrapped around Emily's finger with more strength each time. Hope returned in inches. Mark, meanwhile, was celebrating. The promotion party was loud, expensive, and full of people who pretended not to notice Emily's absence. "She's gone," Mark said casually, clinking glasses with Diane. "Good riddance." Sarah laughed, leaning into him. "Now we can finally live." They talked about venues, dresses, power. They did not see the storm coming. Nathan struck first. He never did. He sat in a quiet room late at night, surrounded by screens, tracing financial trails that others didn't even know existed. Emails, shell companies, hidden transfers. Sarah's father had been careless. Nathan wasn't. Within days, the evidence was undeniable. Money laundering, embezzlement, fraud. He sent one message. Anonymous, precise, federal. The FBI raid came without warning. Mark barely had time to stand up. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted as agents flooded the office. "Mark Davis, you are under investigation." His promotion vanished in seconds. His job followed. Sarah's father was arrested in front of cameras. Her screaming filled the street. "This is your fault! You promised me everything!" He had nothing left to promise. Then Lucas moved. Harrington funds quietly disappeared from Davis Family Ventures. Investments dried up overnight. Loans were called in. Credit vanished. Diane's phone rang endlessly. "Our accounts are empty!" she screamed into the receiver. Karen's boutique closed within a week. The house home went into foreclosure. Everything collapsed. Emily watched from afar, not with joy, but with justice. "They thought I was nothing," she said softly. Lucas wrapped an arm around her. "You're everything." And as Olivia grew stronger, so did Emily. The unraveling had begun. The divorce papers were cold and final. Emily sat at the long dining table inside the Harrington estate, her hands trembling slightly as she signed her name. Each signature felt heavy, not because of doubt, but because it marked the end of a life she once believed in. The pen scratched across the paper, sealing what Mark had destroyed. "This is the right decision," Ethan said calmly, standing behind her chair. Emily nodded, though her eyes burned. "I know." Lucas slid the folder closed. "We'll handle the rest." Mark received the papers at his new job. A dive bar. Sticky floors, flickering lights, the smell of cheap beer and regret. The bartender handed him the envelope. "Someone dropped this for you." Mark opened it casually, then froze. His face drained of color as he read the words, "Petition for divorce." "No, no, no," he whispered. He dropped the papers and ran. That same evening, Mark stood outside the iron gates of the Harrington estate. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, eyes wild with desperation. "Emily," he shouted, "please, I need to talk to you." Security moved in immediately. "You're not allowed here," one guard said firmly. "I didn't know," Mark yelled, gripping the bars. "I swear I didn't know this would happen. I never meant—" Inside the house, Emily heard his voice. Her legs gave way. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. "He almost killed us. He left us to die." Lucas knelt in front of her. "You survived. Olivia survived. That's what matters." But the pain still cut deep. Court came quickly. Emily wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry, no makeup except to hide the sleepless nights. She held herself straight, though her heart felt like it might break. Mark sat across the room, alone. No Sarah, no family, no support. When he looked at Emily, his eyes filled with tears. She did not look away. Ethan handled everything with calm precision. Custody, assets, protection orders. Mark's lawyer barely argued. The truth was undeniable. When Emily was called to speak, the courtroom went silent. She stood slowly. "I loved him," she said, her voice shaking at first. "I trusted him. I believed he would protect me and our child." Mark lowered his head. "But he abandoned us. He left us pregnant in the cold. My daughter was born fighting for her life because of his choices." She looked directly at him. "You're a monster, and I will never forgive you." Tears streamed down her face, but her voice stayed steady. The judge ruled swiftly. Full custody to Emily. Mark received nothing. Outside the courthouse, Sarah watched the news from a hospital bed. The stress had destroyed her body. She miscarried. She screamed Mark's name, blaming him for everything. Their relationship ended in hatred. Diane refused to see him. "Don't ever call me again," she said coldly. Mark was truly alone. He drank, he cried, he begged into empty rooms. But it was too late. Back at the estate, Emily stood in Olivia's nursery. Sunlight filled the room. Her daughter slept peacefully in her arms, warm, safe, alive. Emily kissed her forehead gently. "We're safe. No one can hurt us anymore." Tears fell, not of pain this time, but of release. The confrontation was over. Emily had won. The press conference was scheduled for a cold winter morning in New York City. Outside the Harrington Tower, reporters gathered hours early. Cameras lined the street. Satellite vans filled the block. No one knew exactly why the Harrington Group had called an emergency press briefing, but everyone sensed something big. Inside the building, Emily sat in a quiet room, holding Olivia close to her chest. Her daughter was warm, healthy, and finally gaining weight. The soft rise and fall of Olivia's breathing grounded her, keeping her steady. Emily kissed her tiny head and whispered, "This is for you." Ethan adjusted his cufflinks. Calm, controlled, the CEO. Lucas scanned the room, already thinking 10 steps ahead. Media angles, public reaction, legal timing. Nathan checked his tablet one last time. "Everything's ready. Once you speak, the world changes." Emily nodded slowly. "I'm ready." They walked onto the stage together. Flashes exploded instantly. Reporters shouted questions before she even reached the podium. "Who is she? Is this about the scandal? Why is Harrington Group involved?" Emily stood tall. No fear, no hiding. She took a breath. "My name is Emily Harrington," she said clearly. Silence. Then chaos. The room erupted. Did she say Harrington? Alexander Harrington's daughter? The billionaire heiress? Emily continued, her voice steady. "For years, I lived under another name, not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted a real life, real love, real family." Cameras zoomed in. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not stop. "My child was born fighting for her life because someone I trusted chose ambition over humanity." Across the city, Mark watched from a flickering television in his small rented room above the bar. His drink slipped from his hand. "Emily Harrington?" he whispered. "Billionaire heiress. The woman he called Dead weight? The room felt like it was closing in on him. Back at the podium, Emily lifted Olivia slightly so the cameras could see. "This is my daughter, Olivia Harrington. Everything I do now is for her." The press conference ended, but the story exploded. Headlines flooded the internet within minutes. Billionaire heiress abandoned while pregnant. Harrington daughter breaks silence. Corporate climber exposed. The brothers moved fast. Ethan authorized lawsuits across multiple industries. Lucas ensured Mark's name was quietly blacklisted from every major firm. Nathan erased any remaining digital footprint that could help him recover. The Davis family collapsed completely. Diane lost her last of savings. She moved into a rundown trailer on the outskirts of town, bitterness replacing pride. Karen picked up shifts as a waitress, serving people they didn't recognize her and wouldn't have cared if they did. Mark tried to apply for jobs. No calls, no interviews. Doors closed before he even reached them. He watched Emily again on TV. Calm, powerful, untouchable. "She was everything," he whispered. At the estate, Emily stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean. The wind was cold, but refreshing. She held Olivia close, feeling stronger than she had ever had before. Her tears no longer came from pain. They came from purpose. "For you," she whispered again. And this time, she meant the future. Mark sat in the dim apartment he now called home, the weight of everything he'd lost pressing down like a physical force. His phone vibrated again, an incessant reminder of the world he no longer commanded. He stared blankly at the screen, knowing exactly who was calling. Emily. The thought of her name made his stomach churn, the echo of her voice from that video call still ringing in his ears. "You left us to die," she had said. And even now, the words cut deeper than any punishment the courts could have handed him. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to claw his way back into some semblance of the life he had once taken for granted. But every attempt felt hollow. His lips moved, forming words, but they faltered before they reached her. She would not forgive. She could not forgive. Across the country, the Harringtons were thriving. The name itself had become a symbol of resilience, of power reclaimed and sharpened through fire. Emily moved through the estate with a grace that belied the storm she had endured, her gaze steady, unflinching, her mind always half on Olivia, who giggled in the nursery at the far end of the hall. Her daughter's laughter was a balm to the wounds of betrayal, a reminder of what truly mattered. Every morning, Emily would watch her tiny fingers stretch, marveling at the strength in someone so small, and each night she would whisper stories of courage and hope, instilling the values she herself had fought to hold on to. The Harrington estate had become more than just a home. It was a fortress of family, of survival, of a legacy protected by those who had seen how fragile life could be. The marble halls gleamed in the afternoon sun, reflecting both wealth and warmth, a balance Emily had always sought. She moved through the rooms with purpose, overseeing new ventures that her brothers had carefully laid out, projects designed to empower women who, like her, had been abandoned, belittled, or betrayed. She met with advisors, philanthropists, and young innovators who reminded her why she had fought so hard to emerge from the shadows. Every handshake, every signature, every decision was an assertion of power reclaimed, of justice served. Ethan, ever the protector, was at her side more often than not, pacing as he reviewed strategy documents and company reports. His voice, deep and commanding, echoed through the study as he enumerated potential expansion opportunities. "If we push this initiative now," he said, eyes scanning projections, "we can guarantee funding for another 20 shelters this year alone. It's aggressive, but the timing is perfect." Emily nodded, her mind simultaneously on the details and on the broader picture. She was learning, slowly, how to balance the Harrington empire with her newfound purpose. She knew that leadership was not just about wealth, it was about legacy, responsibility, and influence. Lucas, with his signature charm and sharp intellect, handled external communications, smoothing relationships, negotiating partnerships, and sometimes simply being the face of the Harrington revival. He had a natural way of calming potential partners, of winning them over with a smile and precise logic, and he used that to create opportunities that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Nathan, meanwhile, worked tirelessly behind screens, algorithms, and data streams, ensuring that every initiative was secure, every transaction transparent, every plan bulletproof. Together, they formed a trio of support and strategy, each brother complementing Emily's vision in ways that allowed her to flourish. Yet, despite the empire thriving, the shadow of the past occasionally crept into her mind. She remembered the cold, distant look in Mark's eyes, the way he had abandoned them without a second thought. Every time she thought of him, a flicker of anger rose, sharp and immediate, but it was tempered by the clarity of her current life. She had survived, and she had Olivia. That was all that mattered. She could allow herself a moment of fury, a pang of bitterness, but only for a moment. Then her focus shifted back to the work, to her daughter, to the legacy she was building. Mark, by contrast, had nothing left to anchor him. His apartment was sparse, a reflection of the emptiness inside. Sarah had filed suit, taking him to the brink of financial ruin, claiming damages, exposing him to legal scrutiny he could never have imagined. Each court summons was a reminder of his failures, each glance at his reflection a reminder of the man he had become, small, desperate, inconsequential. He had once wielded influence, manipulated outcomes, charmed allies, and yet now he was powerless. He wandered the streets he had once driven through in a luxury car, now walking in worn shoes, constantly haunted by the memory of Emily's voice. Emily, meanwhile, had begun attending charity events, speaking publicly about the plight of abandoned women and the dangers of blind trust. Her speeches were precise, heartfelt, and inspiring, resonating with thousands who had suffered quietly. She became a figure of empowerment, someone whose life story proved that betrayal could be survived and even turned into strength. Her image, once hidden under the guise of Emily Johnson, was now projected boldly to the world. Emily Harrington, heiress, mother, leader, survivor. And she did it all for Olivia, who watched her mother with wide, trusting eyes, unaware of the depth of danger they had narrowly escaped. One afternoon, as the sun poured through the large windows of the estate, Emily sat in the nursery, holding Olivia on her lap. Her daughter giggled, tiny fingers curling around Emily's thumb. "You're safe now, little one," Emily whispered, tears prickling. "Nothing can hurt us anymore." Ethan entered quietly, leaning against the doorway, watching the scene with a protective gaze. "She's growing fast," he said softly, "just like her mother." Emily smiled, a mixture of gratitude and determination swelling in her chest. The family decided to mark Thanksgiving in a way that felt like reclaiming what had been stolen from them. The dining room, once quiet and tense during Mark's presence, now buzzed with laughter, warmth, and gratitude. Olivia, giggling at her first taste of pumpkin pie, reached out for a second bite, and Emily fed her, each spoonful a small act of victory over the darkness they had endured. Lucas raised a toast, wine sparkling in the candlelight. "To us," he said, eyes glimmering with pride, "to family, to survival, to the life we choose to build." The room erupted in cheers, the echoes filling the estate with a renewed sense of hope. Meanwhile, Emily's mind continued to run through possibilities. Every investment, every partnership, every initiative she endorsed was carefully considered, often with Nathan's tech insight and Ethan's strategic oversight. They built foundations for single mothers, shelters, and educational programs. They used the Harrington wealth to create opportunities for women who had been left behind, overlooked, or betrayed. And through it all, Emily remained grounded in her values, never forgetting the trauma that had shaped her path. She had learned that strength was not just in money, not just in influence, but in action and compassion. Mark attempted to reach out, sending emails, messages, even video calls, each one more desperate than the last. Emily did not respond. She watched one day as his messages piled up, unread, and felt no remorse. The man who had abandoned her and Olivia had no place in their lives. Sarah, overwhelmed by the collapse of her own schemes and the lawsuit she faced, had vanished from his world, leaving him completely isolated. The Harringtons watched, detached but observant, as the consequences of his actions unfolded. Emily, though powerful, remained human. There were moments when she felt the weight of it all, the responsibility, the memories of trauma, the exhaustion of running the empire and raising a newborn. At night, she would sit by the window in the nursery, watching the moonlight play on the ocean waves below, Olivia sleeping peacefully. She would trace the tiny features of her daughter's face and whisper promises. I will protect you. I will guide you. I will never let you feel the fear we felt. Those promises were as much a vow to herself as to her child, a constant reminder that the past had forged her, but it would not define her. As the months passed, Emily's initiatives gained traction. Shelter openings, mentorship programs, and scholarships were announced with fanfare, each event a subtle victory against the injustices she had faced. Media outlets began to feature her story, portraying her as a symbol of resilience and empowerment. While some outlets sensationalized her wealth, the focus always returned to her courage, her leadership, and her dedication to helping those who had been abandoned. Mark, now a shadow of the man he had once been, wandered through the legal and financial wreckage of his life. Each day brought new reminders of what he had lost: the promotion, Sarah's betrayal, the Davis family fractured, and most of all, the impossible barrier between himself and Emily. Every attempt to reach her was met with silence, a wall he could not breach. He haunted his empty apartment, a man trapped in the consequences of his own making, while the Harringtons flourished, each day stronger, wiser, and more determined. Thanksgiving that year became a symbol of triumph. Emily sat at the head of the table, Olivia on her lap, her brothers flanking her. Plates of roasted turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, and pies filled the table, a feast built not just of food, but of survival, justice, and reclaimed dignity. Olivia giggled, clapping her tiny hands, and Emily lifted her in the air. To us, she whispered, echoing Lucas's toast. And this time it was more than words. It was a statement of victory, of endurance, of love that had survived even the darkest trials. Evenings were spent walking the grounds of the estate, Olivia bundled in her stroller, the crisp sea air filling Emily's lungs. She reflected on how far they had come, the fragility of life, and the strength. The first snow of winter fell softly over the Hamptons estate, blanketing the grounds in quiet white. Inside, the warmth of the Harrington mansion was almost suffocatingly cozy, a stark contrast to the chaos that had once consumed Emily's life. Olivia toddled across the polished floors in oversized slippers, giggling at the sound of her own clumsy steps. Emily watched from the sunroom, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea, the gentle morning light illuminating her face. Her mind drifted, as it often did these days, to Mark Davis. The man who had once been her world, the man who had tried to destroy it. He was gone from her life, but his shadow lingered, a faint ache she felt only in moments of quiet. She didn't pray for his redemption. She had no desire for him to return. Instead, she reminded herself that the only thing worth preserving was what she had fought so hard to protect: Olivia, her family, and the life they had reclaimed together. Mark, by all accounts, had hit absolute rock bottom. Reports filtered in occasionally through Nathan's network. He had lost his job, the bar he had sunk his savings into was failing, Sarah had left him after her lawsuit drained him financially, and now, homeless, he wandered the streets of New York with a mixture of addiction and desperation gnawing at him. There were whispers of him trying to find Emily, but no one let him anywhere near the estate. He had become a cautionary tale, a man consumed by ambition, betrayal, and hubris. Emily shivered at the thought, not out of fear, but out of clarity. He chose this, she whispered to herself, stroking Olivia's soft hair as the toddler stumbled toward her. Olivia's tiny hands clutched hers, her bright blue eyes sparkling with trust and joy. "But we survived, didn't we, little one?" Ethan appeared in the doorway, his frame broad and commanding as ever, though the tension that had once plagued their lives seemed softened now. "Morning," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of authority and protection. "Security has confirmed he hasn't been anywhere near the Hamptons. You're safe." Emily nodded, sipping her tea. "I know, Ethan, but sometimes even knowing that, I can't stop thinking about what he went through, or what he deserved." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Don't waste your heart on him. He made his choices. You saved yourself and Olivia, and that's what matters." Lucas wandered in behind Ethan, holding a tablet and tapping through the latest financial reports of the family ventures. "The new foundation program is exceeding projections. Women's empowerment, microloans, mentorship, you name it, it's working. Olivia is already becoming the youngest philanthropist in history," he joked, making Emily laugh. The family shared a moment of lightness, the rare warmth of peace after months of storm. Emily's gaze fell on Olivia, who was now attempting to balance herself against a plush sofa. "Be careful," she warned softly, heart hammering. And then, for a fleeting moment, she let herself imagine a life entirely free from fear, betrayal, and darkness. A life where every day began with laughter, tea, and the soft sound of a child's footsteps. But even in this moment of serenity, shadows of the past lurked. Diane Davis had sent a letter, an attempt at apology and reconciliation. Emily had held it in her hands, watching the thin paper tremble as the ink blurred with her tears. The words were desperate, pleading. "Em, I didn't know how to stop him. Please forgive me. I was only trying to protect my son." Emily burned it in the fireplace, letting the flames consume not just the letter, but the vestiges of old grief and temptation. "No mercy," she muttered, her reflection mirrored in the glass of the fire. She knew mercy had its place, but for Diane, for Mark, there was no longer room in her heart. Her days fell into a routine now. Olivia's care, overseeing the Harrington ventures, meetings with the foundation board, and quiet evenings with her brothers. Yet she discovered new joy in the mundane, teaching Olivia colors and shapes, reading bedtime stories, watching the toddler's first attempts at drawing and scribbling on her sketchbooks. Emily had returned to her own art in small bursts, painting abstract canvases in the studio, each stroke a declaration of life reclaimed. But the world outside was not entirely silent. Nathan monitored Mark's erratic activity, reports of petty theft, confrontations with strangers, and his descent into addiction. "It's hard to watch him hit this low," Nathan admitted one evening, eyes glued to the screen. But he made the choices. We only have to ensure he never threatens us or Olivia again. Emily's voice was quiet, yet unwavering. Let him regret every second. That's punishment enough. As winter deepened, Olivia's milestones became markers of triumph. Her first steps, tentative but steady, brought tears to Emily's eyes. She remembered the first time she had held Olivia in the cold darkness of that trunk and the terror that had gripped her. Now, watching her daughter toddle across the marble floors of the estate, she felt a peace she had never known. Emily also began to consider love again, cautiously. A few of the Harrington business associates expressed interest, some with kind hearts, others with hidden agendas. Emily approached each interaction carefully, protective of her heart, yet curious about what life could offer. She was not in a hurry. Olivia was her priority, and the family they had built, unbroken by the past, was her anchor. The Hamptons' estate, once a gilded cage, had transformed into a sanctuary. The halls echoed with laughter instead of tension, the dining room filled with conversation instead of veiled threats, and Olivia's giggles replaced the memory of screams that had once haunted Emily. Each day was a testament to survival, a celebration of life reclaimed from the shadows of betrayal. Even Mark, in his shattered world, remained a distant echo. Reports of him wandering aimlessly through New York, a shadow of his former self, confirmed the justice Emily's brothers had ensured. Nathan, monitoring financial exposure, occasionally forwarded Emily updates. She read them silently, allowing a fleeting satisfaction to settle over her. Mark had learned the cost of his choices, the ruin of his career, the loss of love, and the shattering of his world. But Emily didn't bloat. She had bigger concerns: Olivia's laughter, her family's growth, and the foundation they were building to help others escape their own darkness. The chapter closed one evening with Emily tucked into the sunroom, Olivia asleep in her arms, the estate bathed in the soft light of the winter moon. She whispered promises, not just to her daughter, but to herself. We survived the darkness. We will thrive. Shadows of the past may linger, but we are stronger than fear, betrayal, and regret. We are the Harringtons, and our story is just beginning. The first light of dawn spilled over the Hamptons estate, painting the marble floors in soft gold. Emily stood on the balcony, clutching a mug of steaming coffee, gazing at the ocean waves below. They crashed against the rocks in a rhythmic dance, relentless yet soothing. The world had changed. Her world had changed. But in that moment, a sense of calm settled over her, rare and precious. Olivia's laughter echoed from the nursery behind her. Emily turned, smiling as her daughter played with blocks, stacking them carefully, oblivious to the weight of the past that had shaped her tiny life. Every step Olivia took, every new word she spoke was a testament to survival, a proof that despite betrayal, darkness, and fear, life could flourish. Emily's mornings were now filled with purpose beyond motherhood. She had launched the Harrington Foundation for Single Mothers, a sprawling initiative aimed at providing financial support, mentorship, education, and safe housing for women who had been abandoned, betrayed, or left to survive on their own. The foundation's offices were buzzing with activity, staff coordinating programs, volunteers making calls, donors pledging support. Emily had returned not just as a leader, but as a symbol of resilience, and people listened when she spoke. Her first major public speech was held at a university auditorium. Lights glared down on her as she stepped onto the stage, Olivia safely in the care of her brothers for the day. The crowd fell silent. Cameras clicked. A wave of nervous energy surged through her, but Emily drew on months of surviving betrayal and loss. She lifted the microphone. I stand here today not just as Emily Harrington, she began, her voice steady yet warm, but as someone who has lived through fear, abandonment, and darkness and emerged stronger for it. I want every woman listening to know you can rise from the ashes. Your circumstances do not define your worth. Your courage does. Our stories may begin in hardship, but they do not end there. The auditorium erupted in applause. Emily looked out at the sea of faces, each person touched, moved, inspired. She felt a swell of something she hadn't known in years. Validation, yes, but more importantly, connection. She was not alone, and neither were the women she aimed to help. Back at the Foundation's headquarters, the work never stopped. Emily oversaw programs that provided career training, legal assistance, and safe housing. She mentored mothers, sharing her own story cautiously, allowing them to see both vulnerability and strength. It's okay to be afraid, she would tell them, but fear cannot control your life. You are stronger than any betrayal, any hardship, any shadow from your past. Her brothers, Ethan, Lucas, and Nathan, remained constant pillars. Ethan handled logistics and security, ensuring the foundation operated smoothly. Lucas managed donor relations and publicity, turning Emily's story into a narrative that inspired both hearts and checkbooks. Nathan oversaw technology and operations, creating platforms to connect single mothers with mentors, career opportunities, and emergency support. Together, they had rebuilt Emily's world from fragments of fear and betrayal into a sanctuary of hope. Meanwhile, Emily's personal life took tentative steps forward. She ventured into social events for networking and foundation purposes, meeting kind men, fathers who admired her resilience, men who were intrigued by her strength rather than intimidated by her wealth. Yet she moved slowly, cautious not to let anyone too close too quickly. Her heart belonged first to Olivia and second to herself. Olivia grew rapidly, her personality shining brighter each day. She mimicked her mother's expressions, drew pictures that made Emily laugh, and asked endless questions about the world. "Mommy, why do people hurt each other?" asked Olivia one afternoon, holding a crayon in her chubby hand. Emily paused, her chest tightening. She knelt, holding Olivia's hands in hers. She said gently, "Sometimes people make mistakes. Some hurt others because they are afraid or selfish. But what matters is that we choose love, kindness, and courage instead. That's how we build the world we want to live in." Outside, Mark Davis's world was collapsing further. Homeless, addicted, and abandoned even by Sarah, he wandered the streets with a haunted look. Flashbacks of Emily's screams from the trunk haunted him relentlessly, twisting his mind. He had lost his career, his family, and his pride. Occasionally, he caught glimpses of news reports about the Harrington Foundation, Emily's growing influence, and Olivia's milestones. Each headline was a dagger. "You left me nothing," he muttered one night in an alley, the cold biting his cheeks. "Everything I wanted, destroyed, all because of her." But Emily didn't care. She had moved on, channeling energy not into revenge, but into creating life, hope, and opportunities for others. The Hamptons estate became a hub for women seeking empowerment. Emily personally oversaw the opening of a new residential facility, a warm, welcoming home for single mothers who had nowhere else to go. She decorated the rooms herself, painting them in cheerful pastels, hanging motivational artwork, and leaving personalized notes for each woman who moved in. She wanted them to feel loved, seen, and safe. One evening, as snow fell gently outside, Emily hosted a small dinner for the first cohort of women. Olivia slept soundly upstairs. The women shared stories of hardship and survival, tears and laughter flowing freely. Emily listened, offering guidance, words of encouragement and reassurance. The night ended with a toast. To new beginnings, Emily said, raising her glass, to strength, to courage, and to the knowledge that we can rise from anything together. The women cheered, their voices blending into a harmony that Emily felt in her bones. For the first time in years, she felt a profound sense of purpose beyond revenge or survival, a feeling that she was creating a legacy, and not just for herself, but for generations to come. The early morning sun painted the sky in soft pinks and golds over the Hamptons estate. The ocean glimmered like liquid glass, waves breaking gently against the shore, as if the world itself was celebrating. Emily stood on the balcony, a mug of tea warming her hands, watching Olivia run across the manicured lawn with the energy only a 6-year-old could possess. Today was special. Not just any day. Olivia was graduating from kindergarten, the first step in her journey through life, and Emily felt a tide of emotions she could barely contain. Pride, relief, gratitude, and an unshakable sense of triumph. She recalled the early days, the fear, the terror of that night on the desolate highway. The memory made her chest tighten, but it no longer held her captive. Instead, it fueled the joy she now felt, proof that she and Olivia had survived and thrived. The school had arranged a small outdoor ceremony on the estate grounds, renting tents and folding chairs for the families. Parents buzzed with excitement, snapping pictures, waving at their children. Emily's heart swelled as she watched Olivia, dressed in a tiny cap and gown, beaming with her signature wide smile. Her daughter's eyes, blue like her own, sparkled with innocence and wonder. Emily's husband, Nathaniel, a kind, grounded man who had loved her for her strength and heart, not her wealth, stood beside her. He squeezed her hand gently. "You ready?" he asked, his eyes reflecting both pride and a quiet awe. "As ready as I'll ever be," Emily replied, brushing away tears that had escaped despite her best efforts. She looked at Olivia, who was bouncing excitedly, tugging at her classmate's sleeves. The sight made Emily laugh, a light, unburdened sound she hadn't known for years. The ceremony began, and Olivia's name was called. She marched to the stage with a mixture of confidence and childlike hesitation, shaking hands with her teacher, waving at her classmates, and finally turning to Emily with a grin that made her mother's heart nearly burst. After the speeches and applause, Emily gave her own small remarks, not as a billionaire, not as a public figure, but as a mother who had walked through fire and come out the other side. "To all the parents and families here today," she began, her voice steady, carrying warmth and sincerity, "these moments remind us that life is fragile, beautiful, and precious. We celebrate not just academic achievement, but the courage, curiosity, and joy that our children bring into our lives every day. May they always know that they are loved, safe, and capable of rising above any challenge." The crowd clapped, some wiping tears from their eyes. Emily stepped down, wrapping Olivia in her arms. "You did it, baby girl," she whispered, kissing her forehead. Olivia giggled, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. After the ceremony, the family gathered for a celebratory brunch. The estate staff had prepared a lavish spread,
but Emily focused more on the laughter, the stories shared between friends, and the ease of the moment. Her brothers joined, Ethan with his usual commanding presence, Lucas charming the young attendees with playful antics, and Nathan quietly observing, always ready to capture memories in photographs. "Look at her," Ethan said, nodding toward Olivia. "She's fearless, just like her mother." Emily smiled at Ethan, squeezing his hand. "We made it through because of you, too," she replied, thinking of the sleepless nights, the emergency hospital visits, and the unwavering support that had carried her through the darkest days. Meanwhile, across the city, Mark Davis's life was unrecognizable. He shuffled through a crowded subway station, his coat tattered, his shoes worn. He had lost everything: the promotion, Sarah, Diane, and any remnants of his former life. He worked menial jobs just to survive, haunted daily by memories of Emily's screams, her determination, and her eventual triumph. Each news headline of Emily's foundation, Olivia's milestones, and their life of stability and happiness stabbed at him like sharpened glass. One evening, while taking a bus home from a late shift at a coffee shop, Mark's hands trembled as he scrolled through social media. There she was, Emily Harrington, radiant and powerful, speaking at a global conference on women's empowerment. Olivia was beside her, waving at the camera with a grin that was unmistakably hers. Mark whispered into the cold night air, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But the world he had lost would never be restored. Back in the Hamptons, Emily balanced her dual life, motherhood and leadership. She spent mornings with Olivia, teaching her to read, painting together, and exploring the nearby nature trails. Afternoons were dedicated to the foundation, where Emily oversaw programs, mentored mothers, and coordinated international efforts to empower women. She had grown into a figure of authority and inspiration, her voice carrying weight far beyond the walls of her estate. One particular day, Emily hosted a workshop for young women aspiring to enter business and tech. She shared her story openly, carefully omitting the most painful details, focusing instead on resilience, courage, and integrity. We cannot control the cruelty of others, but we can control our response. We can choose strength, action, and love over fear, and we can rise higher than anyone who ever tried to hold us down. The workshop ended with applause, hugs, and promises of future collaboration. Emily watched them leave, a sense of profound satisfaction washing over her. She was no longer the terrified, betrayed woman trapped in a trunk. She was a leader, a mother, a force of change. That evening, as she tucked Olivia to bed, the child clutched a small stuffed animal. "Mommy, will I always be brave like you?" Emily kissed her forehead, feeling tears prick her eyes. "Yes, baby. Bravery runs in our veins. You are our hope, our future, and our light. Never forget that."